各位贵宾、各位媒体朋友，午安！我们的论坛大概还有在几分钟就会正式开始。在这边我们现场主办单位有准备了口译的服務，中文翻英文，或者是英文翻中文。如果您有需要的话，可以到我们的接待处领取这个口译機，就是耳機。那我们现场有专业口译人员、口译老師为各位进行及时的翻译。Our forum will begin in just few minutes. And today, our organizer has prepared the simulated interpretation service today. So, should you require the translation service from English to Chinese or from Mandarin to English, please approach our reception desk and ask for the interpretation device, the receiver. Thank you very much. We will see you in a few minutes. 各位贵宾、各位媒体朋友，大家午安！欢迎莅临由台湾人间渔师社文创协会主办的能源独立国家韧性论坛。Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished media guests and friends, good afternoon. Welcome to Is Taiwan Energy organized by the Taiwan Fishes and Poultry Culture Association, TPPSACA. 今天我们在现场邀请到了来自德国与美国的能源跟国防外交专家，共同探讨台湾的能源安全现况还有未来，也希望透过这个论坛来提升台湾社会对这个议题的重视。Today we bring together experts from Germany and the United States in energy, defense, and strategic affairs to discuss Taiwan's current energy challenges and opportunities, and to raise the public awareness of this important issue. 那么在今天论坛的一开始，那请容我先跟各位介绍今天与会的讲者以及贵宾。Allow me to introduce our speakers and guests first at the beginning. First, let's welcome 德国在台协会处长李雅庆先生。Let's welcome Mr. Carsten Thies, Director General of German Institute Taipei. Please say hi, greeting to everyone. 以及德国核能科技协会理事长汤马士·塞伯特先生 ，Mr. Thomas Seipelt, Chairman of the German Nuclear Technology Association。前雷神公司台湾区总经理、前美国国防部官员胡振东先生 ，Mr. Tony Hu, former General Manager of Western Taiwan and former official of the U.S. Department of Defense。另外我们今天还有一位贵宾，他将以透过预录影片的方式来进行分享。那我也同步介绍他给各位，保卫民主基金会高级研究员蒙哥马利少将 ，Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery。He's Senior Fellow at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, and he will be sharing through the recorded video today. 那接下来要为各位介绍今天论坛的主持人，前立法委员、前总统府发言人，果拉斯女士 ，Ms. Kolas Yotaka。She will be our moderator today. 以及今天主办单位代表台湾人间鱼师社文创协会，同时也是人间鱼师生活志的发行人李正峰李博士 ，and Dr. Zhenfeng Li, President of TPPSACA and publisher of Table Fish Poetry and Life Magazine。首先，在今天的一开始，让我们欢迎李正峰博士上台为我们说几句话。First of all, please join me in welcoming today's host, Dr. Li, to deliver the opening remarks. Dr. Li, please.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts and Mr. Seipelt and Tony and Glass and also General Montgomery. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to join this forum, and we would like to hear your wisdom to share with Taiwan, so that we know how to cope with the situation in the upcoming years. So allow me to say some words in Mandarin, and thank you. So I will switch my language tongue. Okay. 各位贵宾、各位媒体记者，大家好。台湾人间鱼师社文创协会以及人间鱼师生活志一向提倡以文学是社会现象表达，社会现象是文学的创作根源。这样的倡议不只延续诗的文学传统，探索文学创作新的表现文体，并且以诗的精炼呈现当代独特的主题，为文学注入新的素材与想象，丰富创作的缤纷色彩。今天我们办这场能源独立、国家主权的论坛，是基于我们深度关切台湾的国家主权、民主自由的制度，是保障我们生生不息的创作的基础。因此，与台湾主权有关的现在和未来的主题，如关税之战、如晶片战争、如乌俄战争、如能源供应，这些都是我们最近几期推出与时事脉动的特别报道。人间鱼师生活志借着访问各国的专家来探讨这些重要的议题，希望激发社会的讨论，使这些报道不只在台湾获得社会的注意，也能传扬到世界各地。因此，我们的团队把这些报道都写成中文和英文。我个人从事科技业，充分体会台湾不只有科技力，台湾更有丰富的人情味，我们还有更强的文化力。希望能够引领台湾的价值，让世界看见台湾能源的韧性、电力的稳定和所有人息息相关，是经济发展的原始动力。我们一刻也离不开能源。这是我们今天邀请德国与美国的专家来分享宝贵的经验，希望提供。谢谢大家的莅临，谢谢。
非常谢谢李博士的建议，请先回复。那么接下来我们就要进行今天的论坛讨论。We will begin today's panel discussion later on. 其实就刚刚李博士其实也有人提到了，能源不关乎是一个国家的经济发展，也更是试射国家安全跟生存。所以在地缘政治紧张升高的情况之下，其实能源这个主题已经成为我们国家韧性的核心。那么世界各国，不管是德国、美国、法国、南韩或日本，都在重新调整非核跟再生能源。也检讨他们各自的能源结构。那 的能源有97%都是仰赖进口。那么在局势充满不确定的当下，怎么样降低能源封锁的风险，提升韧性，是我们必须要正面面对的议题。那么接下来我们要进行今天的论坛讨论。We will now begin today's panel discussion. The discussion will be proceeded in 2 stages. 那论坛会有2个阶段举行，那由我们古拉斯女士来进行主持。首先，让我们邀请主持人古拉斯女士上台。Please welcome our moderator, Ms. Yutaka, to the stage. And Mr. Constantius, Director General of German Institute Taipei. 欢迎德国在台协会处长李亚新先生，以及德国核能科技协会理事长汤马士·塞伯特先生。And welcome Mr. Thomas Seibert, Chairman of the German Nuclear Technology Association. Please join us to the stage. 以及前雷神公司台湾区总经理、前美国国防部官员胡振东先生。And Mr. Tony Hu, former German General Manager of Raytheon Taiwan. 欢迎各位贵宾，请就座。
好，各位朋友，大家好，好久不见了哈，我是前立法委员古拉斯。那今天这一场可以说是迷你论坛，好，我们邀请到台上的贵宾一起进行今天针对这一场台湾的国家安全的议题，我们的开放式的讨论。非常感谢各位关心这个议题的朋友，还有媒体朋友，你们都来到了现场。那接下来这1个小时的讨论呢，我们就会聚焦在台湾会不会有没有可能被中共能源封锁，以及在欧洲的经验来看，俄乌战争对德国的能源政策带来什么样的影响？我相信在今天的这个讨论之后，与会的来宾以及所有关心这个议题的朋友将会有不同的见解。那首先我要再次的再介绍一下今天的来宾，要告诉大家为什么我们要邀请他们。首先就是我所尊敬的德国驻台代表 Mr. Dieser， 因为 Dieser 他是资深专业的外交官，其实他在今年的夏天呢才到台湾来就职。那他曾经派驻香港，曾经派驻过旧金山，那他曾经是德国汉堡邦议会的议员，他自己曾经是议员，是一个民意代表。对于印太地区的地缘政治以及一个国家之内的国内的政治是非常熟稔的，这是为什么今天我们邀请到皮子先生来到现场的原因。那其次要介绍的就是德国核能科技协会的理事长 Mr. Seibert， 那他是东德人，在以前叫东德。那在震撼全球的车诺堡核灾之后，他念大学的时候，他选了核工系。他为什么做这个决定？我等一下会问他。那毕业之后，他也一直在核能界服务。那2022年开始，他开始担任德国核能科技协会的理事长。那这个协会的角色就是倡议干净能源，或者说对核能的技术进行研究，尤其是对德国政府提出能源政策的建议。那另外一位坐在最旁边这一位 Tony， 我相信在座的媒体朋友还有台湾的观众朋友可能都已经不陌生了。那其实对我们来说，尤其对我来说，他也是台湾之光，我非常的仰慕他。那他这个是美国前雷神公司的台湾区总经理 Tony， 因为他一路在台湾念书，念到了建中以后才举家随着他的父母长辈来到美国。那到美国在加入雷神公司之前，Tony 他加入了美国的空军，那在太平洋空军总部服务，所以对印太地区的空防以及美国对台的政策，尤其在安全方面的政策是非常熟稔的。那最后一位是我们刚刚提到你今天没有办法抵达现场的美国退役海军上将蒙哥马利将军，那他是现任美国华府的智库保卫民主基金会 FDD 里面的网络与技术创新中心的主任，还有资深研究员。他曾经是美国太平洋司令部的作战主任。那我们已经先预录影，所以稍后也会穿插在我们的讨论之间，我们也会播放稍早我对蒙哥马利将军所进行的采访。那因为现场来宾呢说华语的居多，我看到有很多外国媒体的朋友也来到这里， 那很抱歉，因为说华语的人居多，所以我们今天的论坛是以华语进行。在稍后50分钟左右台上的讨论之后，我们会开放现场提问，提问的时间大概15到20分钟。好，那现场的口译设备呢，基本上是中翻英的设备，好，所以各位可以取用。但是任何台上台下的意见发表，我们都可以用双语进行，包括稍后在媒体记者提问的时候，各位也请完全是开放态度，中文发问、英文发问都好，台上所有的来宾，我们都可以进行双语的回答。来German fine too， 会讲德语的尤佳，好，我们可以优先让你发问，好。好，那台上有2位德国的来宾，为什么呢？因为其实大家都注意到，尤其关心能源的朋友，那德国其实在2023年呢已经进入非核家园，但是大家也知道有一个关键的年叫2022年，2022年发生了乌俄战争。德国虽然不是参战国，但是它的能源的进口却因为这一场战争进行大转弯，那间接的也受到了战争的威胁。所以我今天第一个问题就要请问 Mr. Tietze， 就是德国在常年使用核能之后，你们在2023年进入非核家园，但是就我所知，在过去德国50%的天然气从俄罗斯进口。好，2022年俄乌战争之后，为了制裁，我们停止进口。所以我的第一个问题就是，请问 Mr. Tietze， 在乌俄战争之后，德国的能源政策是不是因为战争的威胁而有所改
变？Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. You introduced us as experts in the field of energy and nuclear and all that. I am merely a diplomat, but the energy policy, of course, of Germany and how the Ukraine war has affected our energy policy, I'm very happy to explain that today. Our main focus with our energy policy is that Germany wants to be carbon neutral. In 2045, we are going through an energy transition where we slowly try to build a capacity for renewable energies to supply the energy needs of the country. In 2023, 50% of the German energy came from renewable sources. In 2030, the goal is 80%, and by 2035, the goal is 100%. Of course, you can also reach carbon neutrality by nuclear power. Why did we opt for renewable energies instead of nuclear power? Many reasons. The first one, nuclear energy is not safe. You mentioned Chernobyl. I could mention Fukushima. We could mention Zaporizhzhia, where during the Ukraine war, everybody is afraid what happens if one Russian rocket hits this nuclear power plant, what happens to Europe. And we had much more basic problems also. 2 summers ago, we had a drought in France. Many of the nuclear power plants were lying next to rivers that they depended on for cooling the systems. And there was the danger that the rivers would not have enough water for cooling these nuclear power plants. So these are the kind of risks why Germany has decided this is not a safe form of energy in the long run. It is expensive. All the nuclear power plants have needed subsidies because they have very high initial investments before they become profitable at some time. We still have no nuclear waste repository where we can store the nuclear waste after it has been used. It's an ongoing discussion, and you can see bitter fighting between the states in Germany. Yes, we need it, but not here in our state, somewhere else, and hopefully somewhere far away from us. Also, building new nuclear power plants is rather slow. It's a lengthy process. It will not help with our energy goals by 2035. If we decided now to build new nuclear energy plants, they would probably not be operating by 2035, and this is when we want to have reached carbon neutrality already. And the most important reason is it diverts funds away from renewable energies. The money you spend for building up your energy supply, you can either spend them on renewables or you can spend them on nuclear or on fossil, whatever. But we have come to realize, especially during the Ukraine war, that renewable energy, where we do not depend on any supplier that can blackmail us. This is what in Germany is called freedom energy, because we are not dependent on anybody else. So this is the energy policy that was conceived and implemented in Germany before the Ukraine war started. And then the Ukraine war happened. And all of a sudden, energy did not only become a question of climate and energy security, but a question of national security. Germany was heavily dependent, as you mentioned, on Russian gas and oil. In 2022, Russia started its war of aggression against Ukraine, and Russia used this German dependency on Russian fossil fuels as a weapon against us. Germany strongly supported Ukraine. This day, Germany is the biggest supporter of Ukraine. We have just inherited this role from the US very recently. But this is something that, of course, is something Russia don't like, and why the dependency on Russia was a weapon against us. So we had to quickly find alternative sources to supply the fossil fuel needs that we still have. And we had to pay tremendously high prices for short-term substitutions from other countries of these energies. That's why our energy prices skyrocketed right after the start of the Ukraine war. And then came 2023. That was the year, 10 years back, we decided we would decommission the last 3 nuclear power plants running in Germany. Now, this all of a sudden was a year after the Russian war against Ukraine started. And we had a debate. Should we still do this? Should we go ahead as planned, or should we rethink this? In the short term, we had to replace the nuclear energy that we didn't have anymore by decommissioning the last 3 power plants by oil and gas, because our build-up of renewable energies was not fast enough. So today, everybody in Germany believes it was a mistake to decommission the last 3 existing, maybe not everybody, but I would say 80% of the politicians believe it was a mistake. It was a mistake to decommission in the middle of the Ukraine war and the biggest energy crisis Germany has ever faced in its history, to decommission the last 3 nuclear power plants, because substitution could only be fossil fuels. Now, in the long run, nobody in Germany is thinking about building new nuclear power plants, because by the time they would be ready to produce anything, we hope to have reached carbon neutrality by renewable energies. So to sum up in one sentence, the essence, normally, as long as we have to substitute nuclear energy by fossil fuels, I think it's a smart move to keep the existing nuclear power plants. Because as soon as you are able to replace the nuclear power by renewables, then decommissioning them is a good idea. So we have learned that lesson, but now for the last 3 that we have decommissioned, it is too late to bring them back. In the long run, we believe it is the right course.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dietze. Very pragmatic, very practical experience to share with us. So 我注意到 Thomas, so you are the next moving to Thomas, and 你在车诺堡事故之后，你才开始念大学，然后你选择了核工系。在我们讨论今天这个议题之前，我也从来不曾问过你这个问题，所以可不可以简短的回答为什么？
the answer actually would be quite short and would be the same answer as today. So it was a promising source of reliable, clean, and affordable energy. It has been at Chernobyl time. It shouldn't forget that Germany is making their own decisions, but most of the other countries have chosen differently. So they're building up some new nuclear newcomers. Poland, for instance, in Europe, so many countries considering to step into nuclear for reasons which I understand as a nuclear engineer. So the answer why I stepped in at that time is the same as today. It's a fascinating technology and some promise for a huge amount of clean energy to the countries who have chosen to step into it.
Okay. 我们知道啊，刚才有提到，在俄乌战争之前，环保一直是一个，包括在台湾也是一个非常重要的议题。我们知道德国的绿党其实非常的强大，坚持反核，而且绿党的政治人物已经进入内阁。那反核者那个反核最大的原因，其实就是因为认为核能不安全，核能会伤害人类的健康。会危害社会的发展，那它也是有部分的这个台湾的人民恐惧核能的原因。在乌克兰战争的前后，你观察德国不用核能以后，那替代的方案到目前为止运作的如何？
First, I need to correct what you just said. The Green Party left the government in spring this year, actually. So the coalition has fallen apart, and now it's a coalition of the Social Democrats and the Conservatives.
Yeah, I mentioned before, but this.
So the decision to step out of nuclear was made by Conservatives. It was not a decision by the Green Party. It was taken by Chancellor Merkel in 2013, as far as I remember. So it was actually the Conservatives who decided on abandoning nuclear, even it took 10 years to put it in place. I fully agree with Mr. Tietz, and I'm not here to comment on the policy, on energy policy of the German government. It was a political decision to even not to prolong the operational life of the last 3 nuclear power plants. There would have been technical decisions. There might have been different options. Yeah? But we need to have to honor the political decision which has been made. I also agree that nuclear power could have served as a bridge technology until anything else would have been in place. So now it's in parts coal-fired plants who are stabilizing the grid. So the coal-fired plants have taken over the role of the nuclear power plants which have been switched off. I'm not fully aware of the date, but I believe there's a policy that will abandon producing energy from coal-fired plants in 2035 or earlier. So it means this has a limit to do that. And this was necessary due to the fact that renewables do not serve 24/7 for obvious reasons. So it needs some resources or available sources for energy which are not dependent on solar and wind. So this has been the major shift in the policy. So away from gas, or to replace the Russian gas by other sources, but also to invest in the renewables massively. But it takes some time, and we should not forget it's not only about the sources, but the grid needs to be rebuilt, because this is some kind of a different way to serve the country by energy. So the grid is actually the one that takes most of the resources. It has to be rebuilt, and it may take another 10 years or so.
Thank you, Thomas. 其实台湾的情况有一点不同，就是如果台湾被中共经济封锁，我移到这个议题，好，我们其实跟德国有一点不同，是我们没有办法透过陆路去采购能源，这是我们跟德国很大的不同。那台湾到底有没有被立即封锁的危险呢？ 今天我们有一个在线上加入的来宾，就是我特别请教的这个问题，我向蒙哥马利将军请教这个问题，所以我们现在来播放稍早我们进行的一段录音。Would you like to say hi to everyone?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, hi, I'm retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. I'm here in Washington, D.C. at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you, Mark. So my question for you is, you have been to Taiwan many times, and you must have noticed that the CCP has been sending fighter jets and warships around Taiwan every day. So my first question for you is Taiwan facing an immediate threat right now at this moment?
So I think that's a very interesting question. I would break down into two parts. One, there's the most dangerous scenario. That's the cross-strait invasion people worry about, amphibious ships and helicopters, or maybe a significant blockade that stops everything. I think both of those are some way off because of investments the United States and Taiwan have made over the last few years. Likely. But there is a most likely scenario. That's a cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign where China uses diplomatic, economic, and administrative or lawfare techniques amplified by cyber activity and influence operations to try to pressure the Taiwan public and break societal resilience. That most likely campaign is going on right now, and the question is, will the Chinese Communist Party increase the intensity of that campaign in the near future? And unfortunately, I think that's likely.
Talking about the most vulnerable point, my personal point of view is energy. And I know you mentioned the energy resilience a couple times. So China recently, in your point of view, is an energy blockade more concerning than actual military strike or bombing campaign?
Oh, exactly. The most likely scenario is that cyber-enabled economic warfare, and there's three sectors they could target: finance, communications, energy. They'll probably go after all of them, but the one they'll concentrate on is energy, because Taiwan's vulnerable here. Taiwan, about 95% of their energy is imported. It's 50% LNG, some coal, a little bit of oil, and then there's some renewables on the island. But the reality is 50% is LNG. The LNG comes from just a handful of countries: Qatar, Australia, the United States. It needs to come through very tricky navigation choke points, and much of it has to come along. It's delivered on the west coast of Taiwan in the Taiwan Straits, effectively. So China can use a mix of diplomatic, lean on Qatar, economic. They can do embargoes or quarantines to block some LNG ships. And the way the shipping works is, I think Taiwan gets about 350 a year, so about one ship a day. It's not exactly one ship a day, but about one ship a day. And they have weeks of stowage, not months or years of stowage. So if China can block 15 or 20 ships through all these different mechanisms, and maybe even just declare a missile closure area near one of the LNG terminals, but if they could somehow block 15 or 20 ships, now you've got a problem on the island. You may get to the point where there's just no LNG, and 50% of the grid has to come offline. And then this leads to another complication, which is Taiwan has one of the most vulnerable grids in the world among developed countries, because such a high percentage is used every day versus, say, the United States. So that when you're relying on that 50%, you're really going to have to start turning some things off. Do you turn off homes and hospitals and schools and the Ministry of Defense, or do you turn off manufacturing, like UMC or TSMC or the many companies that support them? So there'll be these challenging issues for Taiwan and actually for the global economy if China attempts an energy quarantine or an energy blockage of, to create a crisis in Taiwan's electrical power grid.
Have you ever seen any energy blockade in any war
Can you make example?
Well, we haven't had an island. I mean, I'm trying to think back to whether France tried to, blockade, the United States, the British tried to blockade the United States, but that wasn't about energy. That was about goods. Back in the 1776. Honestly, we haven't had this case where there's an island nation like this, very dependent on external services. But in 1945, the United States did an energy blockade. 1941 to 1945, the United States did an energy blockade against Japan. Sinking oil tankers, bringing oil back to Japan. So it has been done. I think this kind of non-kinetic, cyber-enabled economic warfare. No, this has, but it would work, except if the United States, Taiwan, Japan, Australia take actions ahead of time to prevent it from working.
So, do you believe that Beijing is actively considering or preparing for this?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't they? I mean, energy blockade, communications cut off, through anchor drops on cables, attacks on the financial sector of Taiwan. They'll do all of it, and all they have to do is slowly increase the pressure, do a little bit of everything, and just enough that it hurts Taiwan, but the United States and Japan go, nothing's wrong, and don't provide the support that's necessary. So, from my perspective, the important part is that we're able to recognize it and see it, understand it's starting, and immediately flow U.S. support, like U.S. convoys, U.S. Navy ships that convoy in the LNG. China will have to back off. If the U.S. Navy says, we're going to escort these ships to Kaohsiung, I think China would be like, ugh, that's some escalation we don't want to deal with. Set up maritime information sharing centers, set up maritime regional control centers, transit lanes for the LNG ships. In other words, set up a process that says, you're not going to get away with this, China. The United States, Taiwan, even Japan are committed to Taiwan's economic viability and energy viability.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Now, Tony. So, Mark 刚刚提到美国跟日本针对中共对台湾的能源封锁还没有做好准备，你觉得呢？
我中文不太好，所以我用英文讲好吗？对不起。Okay. Well, let me cover one of the main points I think Mark said that we should pay attention to. One is that China is already doing many of the things that trying to impact Taiwan's security. If you look at the Chinese writing on unrestricted warfare, this is actually a term, an act that they teach in their colleges, military schools, unrestricted warfare. Most of us think war starts when the missiles start striking, okay? So China redefined this in 1999 in a book that was written by two senior colonels in their Academy of Military Science. Basically, they will weaken or actually win, hopefully without even firing a shot. They will use cyber, use cognitive warfare, which are going on right now. They're doing it against Taiwan and also against the United States and other countries. They try to tear the country apart from the inside. So if you look at the cognitive warfare and the continuum of phases of war, China has already started their warfare against Taiwan, except most of us do not recognize it as warfare because no bombs and bullets have fallen, okay? Now, as far as coercion against Taiwan on the energy front, okay, do that, and Mark touched on it in the end, where if they conduct this type of blockade, what are the things that like-minded countries like the United States, Japan, Australia, Germany might do? Okay, we'll talk about this in the next phase. I can cover this more in depth on what are the things that can be done to counter a Chinese move toward that direction. But there are many things that can be done, and personally, I don't believe a blockade will be successful. they might try it. Hopefully, China think more about it because a blockade, even though you see a lot of Taiwan media say, "Oh, we can survive, 2-3 weeks," but during those 2-3 weeks, is Taiwan just sitting there absorbing this damage, or the rest of the world just waiting, just watching? No. Something's going to happen. International community is going to do something, and I will cover more later on in the second session.
Thank you, Tony. 那我们接下来呢，就要讨论这个能源的韧性、电网的韧性。我这第二阶段，我首先要请问 Mr. Teaser， 德国的政治跟社会的氛围，现在到底对于核能的接受度，整体来说，我刚刚记得您有提到，大概的比例，但是我特别想请问你这个问题的原因，是因为在台湾支持核能跟反对核能是一个高度政治的、经济的，甚至道德上的争论，所以我们很好奇，作为台湾人，在德国是不是也有一样的辩论呢？
Yes, thank you. The debate is exactly the same, or it was exactly the same, but I think now pretty much the decision has fallen. It was mentioned before, what does Taiwan do when no fossil fuels come in? No matter if it's because of a Chinese blockade or, as in Germany's case, because Russia, where we got more than 50% of our supplies from, just switched off the pipes. If fossil fuels don't come in for whatever reason, economies depending on those fossil fuels for their energy production have a real problem. And the only solution is get away from fossil fuels. No matter if the answer is nuclear or if the answer is renewables, but go to what we in Germany started to call freedom energy, an energy source, and for us this is renewables, but can be something else, but an energy source where you do not depend on the mercy of a possibly aggressive neighbor who can stop your energy supplies, and where you become energy independent. And this is why it is not only a climate issue. You mentioned the Green Party, who was in government before and who pushed the agenda of getting out of nuclear energy, but they also pushed the agenda of we need to be energy independent. We don't want to be blackmailed by countries like Russia. We don't want to be afraid to support Ukraine for fear what could Russia do to our energy supplies. So energy that makes you independent is what I think you should have, and any country should have. We are not living in this ideal world anymore where everybody is friends. This is what we believed for the last 25 years, from the fall of the Berlin Wall until maybe 10 years ago. But these times are over. If we had a world of free trade and friendship among all, would be no risk. We have to face the reality, and I think people in Germany have come to realize there's a bit of a debate whether we should abandon nuclear energy altogether. But since this step has been taken, the discussion now whether to restart it, whether the first plant could be in operation in 10 plus years from now, is sort of futile, and this discussion really, I don't notice a lot of it, but building on renewable energies is the way we chose. Nuclear energy is by far better than any fossil fuels because it also gives you that kind of independence, and every country has to work out what is best for them.
所以你相信能源安全是国家安全很重要的一部分吗？
It's extremely important, and we in Germany would not have survived Russia's switching off of energy supplies if we did not have the opportunity to procure the fossil fuels that we could not replace in a matter of weeks or months or even years elsewhere. You know, from Qatar, from the US, from Norway, from Great Britain, any country that produced fossil fuels, gas and oil. Germany went there and knocked on the door and asked, can you help us? We have to replace 50% of our energy imports from Russia that are gone now by somebody else. Many countries helped. Many countries also saw, oh, they really need it now. We can increase the prices because this is how markets work, right? If somebody is desperate, prices go up. At that time, we were desperate. And we told ourselves we never want to be desperate again.
Thank you, Mr. Teacher. And 我认为蒙哥马利将军呢，跟你的想法一样。他认为能源安全也是国家安全的一部分。接下来呢，我就要询问蒙哥马利将军他对台湾的能源韧性的观察。我们听听看他怎么观察。
So you must have similar experiences in the U.S. too. Many people have concerns about nuclear energy. The most common argument against it is the fear that the nuclear power plants could be targets during wartime and leading to tragedy. Yeah. So in your point of view, would a nuclear facility be likely targets in conflict?
So I have a special knowledge here. I ran nuclear power plants on U.S. Navy ships. So I was a reactor officer of the USS.
I remember you were the nuclear engineer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a very good understanding of this. I'm a strong believer in nuclear power. When I thought about my ship getting hit with a missile, my nuclear power, I didn't worry about contamination or radiation. I worried about getting killed by a missile. Right? It is not, I don't think, there are many, look, I think nuclear power has value to Taiwan, but it's a national decision for the president and his team to make. I think that nuclear power plants are inherently safe. And when they lose power, lose weapons, they can be saved. If ahead of time you think China's going to target them, you could shut them down. I would not do that. You know, all the fighting going on in Ukraine has not led to a reactor casualty. It's led to energy power grid casualties. And I don't, and the final thing I'll say is, China, again, I think China doesn't want a Taiwan that's very badly damaged, whether by missiles, by tanks, by aircraft, or by nuclear contamination. That's not the Taiwan China wants. So I think that it's something you should think about, it's something you should plan for, but it's not something that should drive your policy.
And you knew that we just shut down the last nuclear reactor. So from a national security point of view, do you think a country like Taiwan should maintain or develop nuclear energy?
You know, this is a domestic decision. I think you should listen to the legislative yuan, you should listen to the referendums, you should listen to, you know, and then the president will have to make a choice. I will say that alongside any decision like that, I would be working very aggressively on small modular reactors. Now, we have to be careful here. Small modular reactors of 2 or 3 megawatts will be available soon. And eventually there'll be small modular reactors that are bigger and could be a big role to play in an electrical power grid. But those facts are not together. It would take many years, maybe a half a decade to decade, before we have the larger power small modular reactors, the very stable, safe systems. So that is a partial solution, and it's up to the leadership to decide whether long term they want to restart those reactors. I will say it's not a click your fingers thing. Refueling a reactor takes time. You have to make back order. You have to order things, and some of these things are back ordered already because of the explosion of nuclear power growth around the world. So it could take some time.
Can you tell us more the importance of a grid resilience? Because you mentioned a couple of times in the previous interview and even just now that you noticed that our grid here in Taiwan is vulnerable. So vulnerable how?
So the grid resilience issue, it's kind of a good news, bad news thing. The good news is Taiwan's got this vibrant, growing manufacturing and industrial base. The bad news is that puts more pressure on the grid, right? So the growth of Taiwan, what's made it a special country in Asia and in the world for the last 30 years, also introduces some vulnerability. I mean, if I could go back 30 years ago, I would talk to the leadership of the country and say, you better plan, you got some great ideas here, let's plan for a bigger grid. But what's happened is the amount of power that the grid normally operates at is much closer to 100% in Taiwan, it's I think in the high, mid-70s, than say it is in the United States where it's in the low 60s. In other words, that means you don't have room for systems to be in maintenance or systems to be subject to a cyber attack, and they come off the grid, or to run out of LNG or run out of coal, you know what I mean? So there's just less room for error in a grid that's running at a maximum capacity. And again, why is your grid at maximum capacity? Because your manufacturing growth has been explosive. Well, it's harder to put more coal or LNG power stations online. And you have a bad enemy, an enemy willing to use cyber against your grid. China, there's no doubt China has penetrated the US grid, the Japanese grid, and the Taiwan grid, and probably has put some malware or hooks so they can get back in a crisis and create a disruption in the cyber grid. So that would just add to the problems. So again, Taiwan has a vulnerable grid because Taiwan has had explosive manufacturing growth over 3 decades.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So 我想请问 Tony， 战争期间攻击能源设施是很常见的手法吗？
Actually, Russians doing it right now against the Ukrainian energy sources and also distribution systems. So that is a threat, and we should expect China to do that in case they want to initiate any type of hostilities against Taiwan. And energy resiliency, which is the main topic of our discussion here today, I think Taiwan certainly need to not only survive to counter any effort of a blockade to choke Taiwan's energy. Now, Mark mentioned earlier that Taiwan needs energy supply almost once a day. Okay, and so I think one aspect that Taiwan should look at right now is it's not doing enough to protect its stockpile of items from blockade. I believe Taiwan needs to build more hardened underground storage area for LNG and fuels. Right now, I think Taiwan is very vulnerable to that kind of attack that you mentioned. Okay, and also I believe when we talk about blockade, as Mark did, I think international response will be very quick and very significant. I believe coalition escort convoy, which Mark mentioned, will take place within a week. And air bridge, like we did during Berlin airlift, that will take place within a couple of days, I believe, to bring critical supplies into Taiwan to challenge China's action. So also, I believe counter-blockade of the PRC in other critical choke points like Malacca Straits will happen within a few weeks. And certainly, a lot of international community will come assist Taiwan and do other things to prevent China from doing this type of things. But for Taiwan, Taiwan needs to be prepared to receive this international assistance. If escort convoy comes, if air bridge gets established, okay, Taiwan should have a plan right now to be able to receive, stage, onward movement, and integration of this stuff into the society. Taiwan needs to identify the critical path item to make this happen. I think this is what's lacking because, like I said, I fully expect China to do things like that. And the world will come help Taiwan. But Taiwan is not prepared to receive that help. It's nothing. So Taiwan needs to look at the reception reception capacity in these ports, which ports will be used, which airport, which seaport on the west side or east side, okay? And you need to know what is your capacity to receive, because your capacity determines how many ships can come in every day, okay? So they can be processed orderly. In addition, you need to know your outflow capacity, because you want the ship coming to be able to outflow right away and turn them around to do another round during those blockade times. All right. So, and also Taiwan needs to have ability to protect the things that come in. Protect from what? From sabotage by China's fifth element. Okay. So these are the things I think Taiwan needs to think about. And also, once the things get here, what is the distribution network? What are the tools you're going to use to transport flight trucks to get them out? Once you get to an area, major cities, you also need to figure out how to get it to the end user, integrating into the society. Now, I don't think government is ready to do this without help from many of the civil society organizations like Chiji and others. So this type of discussion should be taking place right now. This type of coordination should be taking place right now, so that when and if blockade happen, an international community come help Taiwan, which I fully expect that will happen. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we will take action, but Taiwan has to be able to ready to receive, distribute, and survive. Because otherwise, you get all this stuff stuck at ports and locations, you don't have no way to get to the people who need it. It's the same as blockade working, right? So you want to make sure it's not working. Okay, so these are the things I think Taiwan should think about right now. Another aspect I think Taiwan can survive if China institute a blockade to block Taiwan from receiving other things is the non-military aspect. Okay, non-economic sanction. Okay, when Russia attacked Ukraine, the world stopped processing SWIFT codes of Russian banks, took them away from international finance community. So stuff like that, I think we fully expect that to happen if China does something bad. And also, a lot of countries might stop processing Chinese ships at their ports. You know, you come to Seattle, you're from China, you wait outside. Rotterdam, you wait outside. China is an export-oriented economy. This was to have significant impact on China. Okay, so another thing is, if China do a blockade, it's going to take a long time for it to take effect. In the meantime, what do you think the United States and Taiwan's partners will do? We will be moving forces forward in order to deter China from moving toward a military option. Okay, once those forces get forward presence and get around Taiwan, in the Philippines, in the Senkaku Island, Ishikawa, in Japan, then China's military option is out. There's no way they can win if the United States deploy a joint task force with coalition forces from Australia, the United Kingdom, certainly Japan, okay, and maybe even Germany. Okay, so I think these are the things that we can think about, and also I hear people question the U.S. commitment to Taiwan in the case of a blockade. Okay, I think if you look at Taiwan Relations Act, you must give credit to those people who came up with the Taiwan Relations Act. They thought about situations like this. If you look carefully, they used boycotts and embargoes in Taiwan Relations Act to cover other actions that might cut off those critical supplies to Taiwan. And they use the word, if this happens, okay, it is of grave concern to the United States. Grave concern, okay? Now, if you study U.S. policy statements, when we use grave concern, that means that subject touches on U.S. national interest, and we're going to defend it. Okay. So once again, I think it's pretty clear that the United States will take action right away if China tries to impose a blockade. So, in closing, when we talk about Taiwan's ability to survive in a blockade scenario, including an energy emergency, we should not only look at the impact on Taiwan, we should look at the impact on China. Can they survive a lengthy blockade activity? They might fold before Taiwan folds, okay? Because who's going to establish escort convoy and air bridge to China on stuff they need? Okay? So, the second thing, Taiwan should have a plan in place right now. Get ready to receive support from international community. If a convoy starts coming every day, during the previous war game in June of this year, same scenario came up, and there were 2 retired U.S. 4-star, 2 retired Japanese 4-star in the war game. You know when this scenario came up, the first thing we did was we started a convoy, and we asked coalition partners would they participate. They all did. Every one of them did. Okay, and at that time we determined 5 ships a day. But we did not talk about can Taiwan absorb 5 ships. Okay, so that plan, the reception plan, okay, the staging plan, the onward movement and integration RSONI plan should be developed. Taiwan needs to look at that. Otherwise, it's a moot point. The stuff gets piled up at the ports, at the airports. It doesn't get to the people who needs it. Okay, so that's the 2 things. So when we look at blockade, let's look at not only the impact on Taiwan, but impact on China. Second thing is Taiwan needs to have the plan now in case the international community comes to the aid, so that organizations like Tzu Chi and others is ready to take over the distribute the items house to house if necessary. Okay, government can take care of those LNG and stuff where it needs to go, but people's needs needs to be addressed. Okay.
The civilian defense.
Right. Civil defense. Civil defense.
Okay. Thank you, Time, for the precious sharing. So I'm going to end this panel by asking Thomas the last question. 最后一个问题，请问他们是因为你是核能专家，刚才 Mark 他也提到，所以不管是台湾的政府、美国的专家，甚至于德国的政治人物也都有提过 SMR。那你认为 SMR 有未来吗？ What is the future of SMR?
Difficult to answer questions. So let's say SMRs means small modular reactors, which are not so new actually. So Mark mentioned that he was operating one. The military already using it for years in submarines and in aircraft carriers. The difference is they don't care about the cost. Yeah? No one cares what the cost of it should be cost efficient, which is a different commercially used concept. So let's start with a good one. Mr. Tietz already mentioned that a small rule and an exception that new build nuclear projects exceed time and budget. There are some reasons behind, but one of the hope is that applying SMRs will solve that topic, because then you would be able to produce them like not cars, maybe airplanes. If you can manage to manufacture them in a serial production, it will bring down the cost due to the cost average effect and the cost of the scale, but also bring the quality up. So this is the biggest hope in the SMRs. And there are different concepts. Some of them are just shrinking the known concepts like boiling water reactors into a smaller scale. others are concepts from the recent past, like HTRs or high temperature reactors. So there are more than 300 known projects around the world. Not all of them will make it, but if there might be 5 or 7 of them left and they manage to produce them by the hundreds, then this economy of scale effect might be shown to the community. That's one thing. The other thing is that there are some concepts which limit the waste. And of course, there might be new fields of application like isolated areas where you do not need a nuclear power plant with 1 gigawatt in production, but only 250 of them, and you do not have access to the grid. Then this might be an option you do not have right now. So it means there is some hope that it will be a promising concept for the future. Of course, there are some disadvantages as well. One of them, you rely on fuel which does not exist in sufficient amount, like so-called high-array, low-enriched uranium, where the production capacity is ridiculous right now, needs to be rebuilt. So there are a lot of pros and cons, but overall there's some hope in those SMRs, and there is not a dream, but a lot of people working on it. So I guess this will have a future for sure. Maybe in some niches, there's some micro reactors, the size of a dishwasher, but there's some niches as well. But for the overall SMRs, 250, 300 megawatts, I see really a market maybe in 10 years' time. So I fully agree with Mark on this.
Thank you, Thomas. 我们的讨论呢，暂时到此为止哈。那台湾其实，在大罢免还有核三公投的时候哈，我们很需要修补裂缝，所以我们很需要这样好好的坐下来，好好的讨论，好好的讲话，好好的听不同的意见。好，那混乱跟分裂其实是中共最不想看到的。光是今天这个议题，我相信坐在台上的4位，包括我自己，以及台下的各位。我们对于要不要使用能源，我们各自都在光谱的不同的位置。可是我们需要这样好好的机会，我们希望引进理性的、和平的讨论来看待台湾的国家安全问题，而能源的韧性是第一题。这是我们今天的讨论。我们现在要开放现场的媒体提问。
好，接下来进入媒体提问时间。请大家举手发问。我点到您的时候，请您先介绍您的媒体单位跟姓名，然后提出您的问题。We now open the floor for questions. Please feel free to raise your hand, and when I call on you, kindly begin by introducing your media organization, your name, and followed by your question. Yes, please. 有没有任何媒体朋友要提问？欢迎举手。好，
后面这位。Ready.
Hello, I'm Vincent from Now News. I'm going to address the elephant in the room. So you did mention that Germany purchased the route of using nuclear. After closing nuclear energy, you use coal energy to actually replace the gap. And you did mention that that is probably the wrong decision. If you're going back maybe 3 years or 4 years ago, you probably make another decision. And you did mention that with more, if we can use green energy to actually replace nuclear energy, that would probably be the correct route. Well, the problem in Taiwan is that energy overall is a very political issue. With the current situation now, for the last 5 years, MOE has missed all the marks on its energy plans, including green or gas energy. And with the current situation with the opposition party, they are, I would say, probably sabotaging like the green energy issue in Taiwan. How do you see that? Will Taiwan actually reach a certain sense of resilience?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say if Taiwan reaches a consensus across party lines, but what I can strongly suggest from our German example is that even if you are in favor of renewable energies and think nuclear is the biggest danger imaginable, or even if you believe climate change is a hoax and we should forget about all the green energy and bet on nuclear, there is still common ground. The common ground is that the worst alternative is dependency on fossil fuels, where you need a ship per day to satisfy your energy needs. So I would suggest that even in the politically very divisive climate in Taiwan concerning energy, look at that common ground. Look at the common ground that nobody wants to stick with oil and gas and coal for the reasons that all my colleagues here cited, and then reach a consensus that at least you want to phase out everything that makes you vulnerable to blockades and dependent on daily shipments of fossil fuels. And then there can be a mix of renewables and nuclear power, but the worst thing is the division and the inaction following from that division, that you are neither forcefully building up renewable energies nor maintaining nuclear, but as a fallback option keep relying on fossil fuels. So I believe try to explore that common ground to at least achieve this goal, phase out fossil fuels.
好，还有哪一位媒体朋友要提问 ？Is there any media friends? Oh, yes, please.
Hi, I'm Paddy Stevens. I'm a freelance journalist from the UK. So you've talked a lot about the energy source. So that's nuclear energy, renewables, that kind of thing. I'd like to ask about the actual grid system and the vulnerabilities in that. My understanding is that Taiwan's grid system is very centralized, that there's a small number of nodes which makes it very vulnerable to things like typhoons, but also to cyber attacks. I wondered if you could talk about the key vulnerabilities in the system and what an attack on the grid system would actually look like.
Question to
Tony.
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 Oh.
This is bad.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know enough about the Taiwan's grid systems. I'm sorry. I don't know enough about Taiwan's grid system to really comment. I mean, through different war games, I've seen pictures of it, and I've seen the structure of it, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to say this is vulnerable and that type of thing. So I apologize. I couldn't give you a logical answer. I'm not going to fake it.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay. 好，请稍等。
Hi, Josh Wilkes from Domino Theory. If I may, I'll just put two questions because we have sort of divided panel. So for our German friends, can you briefly exchange within Freedom Energy, where is the sort of resilience against a drop in? Is it only reliable? Is it only renewables, or do you also have some component which isn't reliant on things that can change, such as solar and wind? And then for Tony, can you talk a little bit about during the previous set of Chinese drills, we saw a simulated attack on Kaohsiung's liquid natural gas plant, and we saw propaganda that showed China launching missile strikes on all of Taiwan's energy facilities. So can we talk a little bit about what would happen if that happened?
Okay, so Mr. Dietz first.
Thank you for the question. The resilience part, first of all, is that we do not have to import sun and wind, and nobody can block this from reaching us. Of course, you are right. We need some backup for days where there's no sun and there's no wind. This backup can either be, at the moment we have a reserve of gas power plants that can be quickly switched on and off depending on the needs. In the long term, the idea is also to develop storage capacity that in times when you have a lot of wind, you produce the energy and store it. This technology is still, working on implementing this together with the new grid that we need. But these are the ideas, and there will never be a 100% renewable option because you always need to have some backup. This backup in the German energy policy at the moment is supposed to be a reserve of gas power plant, natural gas. It could well be nuclear, it could well be the small modular reactors also. I'm not an expert, but there has to be something. But with 80+% of renewable energies in our energy supply, we heavily reduce the dependency and the chances for being blackmailed if somebody can just cut off 10% of your energy supply and not 50 or 60, that is already a big step forward in terms of resilience.
Maybe I can add a few sentences. So, it's a mistake. There is no such thing like a German supply line. They're part of the European grid where 450 million people are living in. So it means there's no border between France when it comes to the energy between France and Germany. It's counted, but there is a huge system which actually buffering even the days where we do not have enough sun or wind. So it means part of the resilience is diversification among the European countries.
Thank you, Thomas. And Tony.
Okay, that was a good question. Okay, Taiwan has identified critical infrastructures they need to protect. So when you see scenarios like that, they talk in vacuum as if Taiwan has no defense capability. But the fact is, Taiwan has a very robust air and missile defense, integrated air and missile defense, which covers all these critical infrastructures. I'm talking about Patriots, TKs, okay, and shorter systems. It's several layers of different systems, okay. So there's a way to protect those. They're not that vulnerable. In fact, the biggest threat to this facility actually is not external to Taiwan. It's not those fifth elements who go, Taiwan, China's infiltration, these people who are sympathizers or actually work for China. They plant some kind of explosive device. But these locations are all certainly protected locations, guarded locations. So it's not easy, but it's possible. External attack success rate, I think, is lower. I worry about internal attack because if they can attack those actual location where you download and store, they can attack those pipelines. So the whole grid is vulnerable. You can't protect every inch. Okay, it requires, once again, civil defense. Everybody's set of eyes to defend those things. So, to answer the question, missile strikes and stuff, I don't see it. But is it vulnerable? It is. Okay.
Any question? Okay, thank you.
My name is Karen Chen. I'm from an NGO organization that specializes in energy policies. And I just returned from the US 2 days ago. And actually I attended some conferences and in which SMR was discussed. But I think the general consensus was that it's not going to be commercialized in the next 5 to 10 years. So frankly, it probably won't be in time to help Taiwan. And in a way, we are not really into fundamental research as a small island nation. So I think we can just wait until it's realized in US or in Europe, then we start to think about it. On the other hand, talking about the energy resilience, our German friend is probably not aware that Taiwan is one of the most active geological zones in the world. We have over, I would say, 10,000 earthquakes every year, and over 1,000 of them are over Richter scale 4. So nuclear plant by International Atomic Energy Commission should not be built in a geological area like ours. No, that's actually one of their rules. So frankly, it's very difficult to say it's suitable for Taiwan in terms of residence. But on the other hand, the same geology gave us opportunity in geothermal energy. And in the US, the progress has been very significant. And recently, it takes only 3 to 5 years to build a 500 megawatt geothermal energy if the resource exploration is done. And this is something that Taiwan can do in 1 to 2 years' time to finish its exploration. And then we can start building our geothermal power plants all over the island. In fact, we are sitting on this Pacific Ring of Fire. So, the island is hot underneath. And I think that should be our direction. And I hope you would recognize this fact. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. Thank you. From the back. Question from the back?
From the back. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Stella from Domino Theory. My question, I think, is most appropriate for Tony Hu. I think it's pretty clear Taiwan is not as energy resilient as it could be, and yet major international tech companies, NVIDIA, Google, are expanding their investments in Taiwan. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think this energy risk calculus is for these tech companies? Are they making the ultimate decisions, an optimistic decision about Taiwan's energy future?
Good question. I suspect they all have done their research, but Pamela Montgomery mentioned the buffer zone. There's not much buffer zone in energy reserve in Taiwan. And I'm not sure this type of business decision that they make, okay? And certainly the government of Taiwan needs to look at it. And I'm like Emma Montgomery. I think situation in Taiwan is unique. It's an island, okay? So talking about freedom energy, okay? Until your renewable catches up, I think that was your point, sir. Until your renewable energy catches up, you really should get rid of the other one, And Taiwan, I tend to agree once again with Germany's situation. Taiwan really don't want to get rid of the nuclear energy too early before you can sustain yourself with the freedom energy. So Taiwan's ability to attract businesses, Taiwan's ability to maintain a price advantage which depends on cheap energy in its global commerce really rests on Taiwan's ability to produce those cheap energy. So I'm hoping the government look at long-term. Long-term goal might be nuclear free, but for now, just to survive as a country from the threat next door, from the economic competition globally, I think Taiwan needs to maintain its ability to generate cheap energy. And these companies that signs up to come over, I think that's what they expect, cheap energy. And so if Taiwan wants to have longevity in attracting high technology companies, or any kind of companies, to invest in Taiwan, energy viability is a critical item.
Okay, so question from the back.
Hello, Vincent from Now News again. My question is from Thomas. Taiwan closed its last nuclear reactor this May, making it like the zero nuclear policy. We don't have a definite time of how long it actually takes to restart the nuclear reactors or any reactors. Do you have an estimate time that how long will it take? And secondly, most of the foreign media actually think that Taiwan and China will actually be at a break point around 2027. So will that actually make it in time for everyone saying that Taiwan should be energy resilient by then? Okay.
Well, trying to answer the first part of the question, we did some estimate in Germany what time and what money would it take to bring the last nuclear power plants back to the grid. And at that time, it was for the youngest one, it was a little bit more than a year. So it means we are talking more about months than about years. But it depends on the regulator. There are some technical aspects. If you have taken it off from the grid and well maintained, there is no reason you can't restart it within months. If someone is asking you to bring that back to the latest state of technological development, then you need to do some refurbishment, then it may take longer. But if you really need it and you have it and it's not destroyed and you didn't start the decommissioning, then we're talking about months. That's the first part of the answer, more or less. For the second one, I'm not really an expert to answer that, but I guess you are in a good position to reconsider taking the nuclear power plants you already have back to the grid for some reasons, to have some resilience until you have something else to replace them. When it comes to the supply lines, it might be the only, except of the freedom energy, the only kind of energy where you can store the fuel for the next 10 years if you want to. If you have a couple of years in advance, you can take the fuel and you can store it away, and you are not dependent on having a ship every day to maintain your energy grid. But still, I agree with what has been said, that actually the weak point is the distribution line, which might be attacked first before someone is stupid enough to attack a nuclear power plant. Could be considered a war crime and quite close to dropping an atomic bomb, and no one would really consider it who is not out of his mind.
Okay, thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everyone. I'm afraid we have to end this panel, and we appreciate your thoughts and your expertise and your attendance. Thank you so much.
谢谢。那今天论坛到这边先到一个段落，接下来我想我们进行台上贵宾们的大合照。I would like to invite all the speakers and also Dr. Lee to the front of the stage, and we can have a group photo. 贵宾一边协助我们就位的同时，也跟现场所有媒体说明，今天合照之后，我们会进行媒体的联访，由电子媒体先开始在舞台前联访。结束之后有任何需求都可以跟我们的工作同仁联系。Please look to your front, to the center. 请所有贵宾往左边看 look to your left. Camera at your left hand side. And then to your right. 我们看一下右边的摄影机。Okay, back to the middle. 好，谢谢贵宾。那请please all our speakers return your seats first. 那请郭老师女士先留在舞台这边。那有没有电子媒体朋友有需要进行联访的？我们在舞台前面可以先进行 跟主持人进行采访。请到舞台前来哦。
我没有问题。哦，没有问。你有问题，我帮你问啊。你有没有问题？他有没有先给你的问题？那我就没有。没有问，因为我只要台箱就够了。其实因为我还有那段在录影。呀，你一定要露麦。哥，他刚问，他一定要问，我帮他问啊。你有问题吗？
有联航需求媒体朋友请往前。
你们家有要问吗？没有。
我家也没有哎。真的。我真的很大约，我只抓我自己。我没有补拉脱，只有听那个耳机翻译。人家是谁做啊？
不好意思。
这几新的，还有另外一个是，
好，你先说，谢谢。可是你看我们的那些主题啊，对，就是我们的
我没有要你吧？
因为科技东西然后进入这现代人的这个成就发展而且所以呢，到我们这个时代呢，在本来就是科技公司你看那个然后这些要包括这样的一些含义，那这个教文化上那我觉得这个当代呢，这些重要的事情，其实很多人都会发挥，像我们之前因为乌克兰又在科普写侵略史啊，结果很多